Hi, Kevin Coop here, and this is FaceTime with the content guy. So, I'm in the punditry business, and I'm pretty sure I get drummed out of the union if I don't come up with a commentary this week on the whole United Airlines fiasco. They've had about as bad a public relations week as I can imagine a company having. And the thing is, I'm trying to figure out exactly what it is I should say about it. And we've all seen the pictures, right? The guy's getting dragged off the plane by the authorities, and his lip is bleeding, and he's screaming, and his whole body has gone limp, and it's just amazing. And all because United needed 4 seats to get members of a flight crew from Chicago to Louisville, Kentucky. But I do have some thoughts, and specifically lessons that I think can be learned from this situation. A situation that I think we all can agree is FUBAR. So here they are. Number 1, employees can't behave like automatons. You'd think somebody on that airplane or somebody who was part of the ground crew would have looked around and said, we have a problem here. Not only is this guy really, really upset, but everybody on the plane is pointing cell phones at us. They are taking pictures. They're taking videos. There's got to be a better way to do this. It simply didn't make sense for them not to stop and say, okay, let's think our way through this. Maybe there's a different way to approach it. Somebody should have said, this is not a good idea, but nobody did. Second, people have to use common sense. The thing is, to go from Chicago to Louisville, Kentucky by car is only 5 hours, a little bit less. They could have taken the 4 members of the flight crew or 4 passengers, stuck them in an Uber, and they would have been there pretty quickly. Nobody thought to do that. Nobody used common sense. There were ways to deal with it. Third, people have to think long term. My understanding is that the airlines lobbied to have a $1,000 cap on the amount of money that they would have to pay passengers if they had to make passengers get off the plane and replace and have them take another flight. The airlines wanted the $1,000 cap, which probably made sense in the short run. But in the long term, had they had a little financial flexibility, they probably could have gotten 4 people. If they'd offered $2,000, if they'd offer a year of free flights, I'm sure people would have been sticking up their hands. On the other hand, there were people who probably couldn't leave that plane. And it may be that the people they picked on to leave were people who couldn't leave the plane, who needed to be someplace. They were thinking short term. They should have been thinking long term in terms of how they were going to deal with problems like this. And finally, people have to communicate. It seems pretty obvious that the people on the ground didn't communicate with the passengers, and that didn't make a lot of sense. When Oscar Munoz, the CEO of United, decided to send a memo to his employees saying, I'm behind you 100%, emphatically, I think was his word, well, he never seemed to account for the possibility that everybody was going to read it, including his customers, who he essentially was telling that he was not with his customers 100%, and that's a bad thing to do if you're in a customer-facing business. The thing is, as bad as United's situation is, all I could think of myself as I was reading the stories and watching the video is there were probably a lot of retail CEOs out there saying, oh man, what a disaster. But what they should have been saying to themselves is, man, I got to make sure that we don't have the kind of organizational, institutional, and cultural problems in our company that could allow such a thing to happen here. We have to make sure that our employees aren't going to behave like our automatons. We have to make sure our employees are going to use common sense. We have to engage in long-term, not just short-term thinking, and we have to communicate more effectively. And we don't do all those things. At some point, we could be in as big a mess as United is right now. People should not get complacent or self-congratulatory about the fact that United is having these problems this week. The fact of the matter is, this could happen to anyone. Anyway, that's what's on my mind this morning. And as always, I want to hear what's on your mind.